Welcome to the transmission of Gene Key 25. It's a incredibly intense and beautiful gene key that's so perfect for this equinox period leading to the eclipse. So if you were born in this week, this is your gene key. And we're talking about the shadow of constriction, the gift of acceptance, and the siddhi, the ultimate frequency of universal love. So how did we get here? We get here through suffering. It is the core wound. It is your sacred wound. It is that sacred wound that turns into your dharma and turns into your gift. It's that phrase, your mess is your message. So let's unpack this a little bit more for this time with the idea that we're in an incredible time of healing of suffering with the nodal axes conjunct the Chiron, the wounded healer, the eclipses tripping Chiron, the rope of Chiron, the wounded healer. So let's receive a healing. Are you open and willing to receive a healing? Because this is the gate, the transmission, the gene key of the healing frequency. So we start off in humanity with massive amounts of suffering, and the deepest suffering that lives inside our body as constriction. And that is that holding of the tension and being wound up so tightly. And the deeper fear inside of that tight, wounded, constricted nature in our bodies. And you can just scan your body right now and see if you can feel where that constriction is. Where do you normally hold that? In your stomach, your abdomen, your neck, your shoulders, your pelvis, your hip flexors. We all hold tension somewhere, like our jaws. How many of us grind and clench in the night? We're holding tension, we're holding constriction, and it's fear, and it's the fear of annihilation, the fear of not existing. It's a deep existential fear, and that is writ large in the collective, especially during this time when we are receiving report after report after report of the change of the earth and how it may tip to be unsustainable for human life. We know that. We can deny that. We can not pay attention to it. But just like a little child growing up in a dysfunctional family, and you're like, oh, they didn't hear that comment. No, they heard it. They took it deep into themselves, and they don't need to hear it with their conscious mind. They heard it with their whole body. And that's why we carry around deep ancestral wounds. And these are the exact wounds that Gene Key 25 is here to heal. So how does Gene Key 25 do this healing? Well, hopefully you're going to like the answer because it's the same as all the gene keys. It means going deeply into your suffering, descending into the very heart of the suffering. Now, that means that we finally wake up to the fact that we have suffering. We stop going on autopilot and trying to drown out the suffering through addictions, drown out the pain through busyness. And we just say, wait a second, actually, I'm in pain. Actually, I'm feeling something that feels really uncomfortable to me right now. Or I'm noticing that the entire conversation I'm having it with like my stomach in knots. And I'm overriding it because I don't really want to know what does it mean. Because if I know, I might have to speak something and it might change everything. Let's take a breath into that, because that's just what happens as being a human and all the ways we're negotiating and moving through emotional material. But this constriction, we can also feel it in our breath. How many people breathe from here up and not deeply in the belly? Belly breathing. Let's do that right now. Belly breathing is your way out. So first, ground yourself with some belly breaths. And the way that belly breaths work is that the inhale actually extends your belly. It like puffs it up. And the exhale brings your belly in toward your spine. Try doing that. And you take that mind activity and the worry and the anxiety, and it releases because it goes into the belly, the power center. Just do that for a moment as you're listening to this transmission. Practice that breath because you're already practicing Gene Key 25 and unwinding the constriction of this deep, deep fear that is existential, that we can't make it go away. We can only meet it. The only thing that meets and dissolves this fear is facing it. And that's the gift of acceptance. So the Gene Keys has a formula for shadow work: acknowledge, accept, embrace. And so it takes a process because not all of us go from 0 to 100. We have to walk the paces of touching it and backing off, touching it and backing off. One of my mentors said, you know, you're going to touch it so many times that someday you will not be afraid of it. And you'll just go there. And that going there, you'll wonder why you ever waited, because it just dissolves. It's because it's an illusion. It's not really real, but it is real to the psyche. It's real to the ego that thinks that it's going to die. And yes, the body is going to die. And who we are is ineffable. And yet that split, that dichotomy, that duality has our human selves ignoring, covering over, denying, to not really face the truth of our mortality in form, the mortality as this template, the identification with who I think I am, my name, my history, all of that will pass. But once we move into acceptance and we get on the side of life, that's true. And some people do death meditations, like, you know, the samurai, before they went into battle, they completed their life because they wanted to make friends with death. They didn't say like, oh, I'm coming home. No, they completed as if they were to die. That takes a different kind of courage. And they didn't give up at all. They didn't go into battle expecting to die. They went in complete with death, so that if they did die, it's all good. They are complete. But that level of freedom really allowed them to go into battle with just full force and passion. Isn't that beautiful? Like, that's a metaphor for how we get to live our lives. Those near-death experiences that cause you to see something that has you actually really living. Gene Key 25. The physiology of Gene Key 25 is the heart center. This is the alchemizer, the neutral heart center. So here we have the duality of our lower triangle, our first, second, and third chakra. And then we have the upper triangle, the sixth, seventh, and eighth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth chakra. And I put the eighth as our auric field. And then we have our heart center that unites the triangles through this neutral space. And so I want you to remember this neutrality, because this is the space of the alchemizer. It takes in the suffering of the world because it identifies with the suffering of the world, and it alchemizes it into love. That's what the province is of really understanding suffering. And the metaphor and the example of this trajectory is the Christ on the cross, taking the sins of the world on inside of his own body. And there's some really beautiful ways of expressing this. Cynthia Bourgeault talks about this in some of her books about, and she's quoting some other mystical teachers who talked about how Christ could not enter hell. And that's part of the mythology, that Christ enters hell for 3 days to release the captives, people who were there before Christ liberated. So the souls that were there. So he goes into hell. And it says Christ cannot go into hell, but love can go into hell. And I love this. So what does love do in this metaphoric, like low consciousness, negative consciousness, just vile hatred, victim consciousness, this place of the absolute worst. And we can know it in ourselves as our own shadow of places that we've been that's been so bad, so negative, so hurtful, so violent in our own selves. And we visit that place. That's hell. That's hell on earth. That's hell right now. And so many people are living in that hell. So imagine that love goes into that place and says, I accept you. I'm right here with you. I'm not going anywhere. And just beams its love, radiates its love. I mean, I just get tears. And it transforms the whole place. People just start to wake up to who they really are. They wake up from the dream. They wake up from being caught in autopilot of a negative mind that's been conditioned to protect itself. They wake up. And that's really the resurrection. That's the story of the resurrection. Oh, I guess we have Easter next week. So here we are. This is a beautiful Easter conversation. And so every day we can live that. We can live the death of that ego side of ourselves that is so convinced of our negativity by just pure witness, pure love. Nothing to do, nothing to fix. The witness itself alchemizes and changes. And that births us open to universal love. They say that Gene Key 35 is the master key of the gene keys. It's in the ring of humanity. And I love this idea that we talk about the Christ becoming human, living on earth as divine. That's the ring of humanity. And so 25 lives in all of us as the hope of humanity. That at some point in our lives, and maybe multiple points in our lives, we begin to experience the who and the what that we really are. And we get to shine and radiate out in that beauty. Gene Key 25 will also test you. So the more that we accept and we get alongside of, we will experience the tests. And how many have had these tests? They're not simple. I remember just the other day walking in the labyrinth and I was praying and someone interrupted me and I was so angry. And then I was laughing that I was so angry praying that someone interrupted me, so it's always back and it's always back again. I didn't accept that someone interrupted me. I was appalled by it. And that's okay. That's just my humanity. It's totally okay. And witnessing it, bringing even love to that. I spoke in another video about my time when I was working for an organization to fight child sex trafficking. And I was asking myself, why are you doing this? And I was in my 30s and very much on a spiritual path. But one of the inquiries I wanted to know was, does love live here? In the worst, horrible tragedy that I can ever imagine, does love live here? Because if love doesn't live here, then love isn't real. And that's what I wanted to know. Now, my definition of love shifted and changed because it's not a soft, warm, fuzzy, gooey, romantic love. It's not a feel-good love at all. It's more akin to what's so. It's more akin to the energy that I bring to it in and through me. And then there's a noticing of the energy that's already there. I can't really describe it in any other way, but it did transform me asking that question. And that question is really a question to ask yourself. Does love live here? So before you go down a descent of negativity or nihilism, just turn it around with a question, an inquiry, a contemplation in earnest, and you shall receive. There were many times throughout sacred texts where Yeshua has said, may those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Those who have eyes to see, let them see. It is definitely a shift in perspective, a perceptive that we must have in order to truly see through the veil. And that's what's possible during these times of Easter, the equinox, sun moving into Aries, new cycle, eclipse. It's huge moments right now. But let us not forget that we're here for love. We're here to experience love in human form, in the ring of humanity. And so we dedicate this transmission to all beings. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts.